Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Snapshot, episode 60. I'm Brendan Patrick, joined always by Marvel Snap phenom KM Best. KM, your week in Marvel Snap, sir.
Pretty good week. Cull Obsidian came out, and he is a pretty significant buff to the Thanos Lockjaw archetype. I think that archetype specifically is now probably what I would say is the best deck in the game. Because of the influence of Cull. But I would also say without Cull, it was still like, one of the top, 4 or whatever. Just when you put Cull in it, I think it goes from one of the top 4 to probably the best. Like, it goes from like, okay, I would say there's an even chance between any of these 4 decks being the best deck in the game to, I would say probably 60% Thanos, 40% the other 3, right? And that's what Cull does. And that is an important thing to do. The issue I'm seeing is, I don't think he does that in any other archetype. I think basically every other archetype, he's like the world's most replaceable card. Like, people are playing him in bounce. I saw people were like running 3 1-drops to fit Cull in and 5 4-drops. And that one has terrible win rate on untap, like worse than if you had not put Cull in the deck. But if you cut one of your 4-drops, Enchantress, for Cull, your win rate actually goes up and your cube rate actually goes up according to the numbers there. Which I think a lot of that is because people are going to be expecting Enchantress and won't be expecting Cull, and that'll sort of change as people grow to expect the Cull. But it's like, it's a pretty marginal gain. And so for 6,000 tokens, the only place this guy is actually plausibly worth 6,000 tokens, I'm not even going to say he is, but plausibly worth 6,000 tokens is in Thanos Lockjaw, very specifically. That is where he goes. And I think if you want to drill down on what makes him good, it is the card Scar. And I think if you want to get even more specific here, if this guy was released as a 4/9, I think he is unplayable.
Yeah,
I think he is actually unplayable. And the change to 4/10, whoever in their department came up with that and was like, this is actually a buff, it was a really good idea, because it was.
Yeah, so, I mean, obviously at 4/9 it dodges Shang-Chi, but Thanos Lockjaw has a whole entire new high roll, which I think is debatably better than the Lockjaw Mindstone high roll. To be honest, it's actually just Time Stone on 2, Cull Obsidian on 3, Scar on 4, Devil Dinosaur on 5, Vision, and then whatever you want on 6. So you're double 5-dropping, and you're dropping Cull Obsidian on 3 and Scar on 4. Like, there's not enough Shang-Chis in the world, period. Like,
yeah,
it's just nothing.
That is what where Thanos is at right now. Is there are not enough Shang-Chis in the world. Like, we are playing too many big things. You are not in this game. We are playing too many 10 power dudes. There's just too much numbers on the board.
Do you think
hold on? I want to say that nut draw. That's cool. That's not why he's great there, though. It's because he's good with that nut draw. He's also great when you're doing your other nut draw. Because playing a big guy and putting a stone into Lockjaw is basically the best possible play you can make. There is no play better than that, right? And so you have Cull Obsidian to enable that. You have Wave to enable that. When you play Black Swan in Thanos decks, which some people have been doing, myself included, the reason she's in there is to enable that. The whole point of any of those cards is when you have Lockjaw, they get like a 2x multiplier because they allow you to double spell. And when you're double spelling with stones, especially if you've played a Mind Stone, a lot of the time what happens is you just like play 2 6-drops. Like, you just play 2 things with 10 power. And like Cull Obsidian, like, it's like, okay, it's turn 5. I am playing a stone into Lockjaw and I'm playing a Cull Obsidian, and that stone goes and gets Magneto. You just instantly win the game. Like, and there's a lot of Cull Obsidian lets you do that. Black Swan lets you do that. Wave on 4 lets you do that, right? So like you get the Wave on 4, you go, Lockjaw on 3, Wave plus Stone on 4, Big Guy plus Stone on 5. That's the nuts, right? And Cull Obsidian is another thing that gives you that on turn 5. So it's not just he's got like, oh, I'm the nut draw with the Time Stone. That's cool. I did it like one time in like 50 games. It's that he's also great with the other stuff in Thanos that Thanos is already doing. He's a boost to... He's not just an additional nut draw. He's a boost to your existing nut draw. And that's why he's so good in Thanos and so fine in every other deck that plays him.
Yeah, I wonder with the bounce low win rate, if that is anyway indicative of like the data issues we've talked about for a long time in this podcast. I do think that bounce is a somewhat harder archetype to play.
No, because I'm comparing 2 other bounce lists.
Okay, 2 other bounce lists. Yeah,
so like when we compare...
I cut the Enchantress myself.
Right. So like when you go and look at decks with Beast and Falcon in them on say untap.gg. I'm gonna refresh because like I did this for my Cull Obsidian video, so I'm just gonna look at the numbers as recently as I could possibly get. So like decks, we're gonna do 200 game win rate, right? Just the classic untap.gg 200 game win rate. All right. So the highest win rate one is 54.2, 300 games. And this is with a 6,000 plus collection level, 100 plus on the rank, obviously. And it is the one that it is like this incredibly off the wall thing that no one seriously seems to be considering. But it's like Forge, Spider-Ham, Iceman, Nico Minoru, Beast, Zabu, Falcon, Black Swan, Shang-Chi, Werewolf, Enchantress, Cull Obsidian. And you could actually very much more easily sell me on this than on like just shoving Cull into the Annihilus bounce stuff, because the next highest win rate one here is just normal bounce. And we're looking at Forge, Iceman, Hood, Nico Minoru, Beast, Zabu Falcon, Shang-Chi, Werewolf, Enchantress, Sentry, Annihilus. You notice what's not there? It's Cull Obsidian. He's not there. That one's 54% win rate, 10% cube rate. All right. So next up is we have Bounce over here. This is the one with Cull Obsidian cut for Enchantress, right? We cut Enchantress from the previous list. We put Cull Obsidian in. Otherwise, it's the exact same list. Win rate is 52.8%. Cube rate is 0.18. And then going back to that previous list, which that one, but we cut Iceman for Cull Obsidian instead of cutting Enchantress. That one is lowest of the cube rates, plus 0.07, and lowest of the win rates, 50.4. This is what I mean when I talk about Cull, where it's like, okay, like there are some compelling numbers here for specifically Thanos, but for basically every other archetype, especially Bounce, it's the world's most replaceable card. Like, if you ask me what to replace Cull with, I would say Enchantress. And I would be right, because you could absolutely do that. Like, if you're playing a Nihilist Bounce, yeah, replace him with Enchantress. Go nuts, dude. You're fine.
In the in the Thanos list, are you playing Leech or are you playing Jeff? Because that seems to be like the flex spot that people are disagreeing on.
I cut Leech because, like, the idea with Leech is it's a Hela card.
Yeah.
Right? But I'm more willing to just, like, go points for points against Hela. And then in every other matchup, Leech is complete ass because it's a 5-drop that does not accelerate your Scar.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is, and like playing 5-drops is getting harder and harder in the deck because you almost always want to wave out a 6-drop because a Kyara will protect it, right? You like investing in 5-drops without having that protection for them is actually quite difficult. And only one of your 5-drops, that's of course Devil Dinosaur, is actually going to discount Scar, and it does that while being an absolute removal magnet. So I find a lot of the time, if I have any excuse to do anything else, I will do it. And so like with Leech, it's like, yeah, if you specifically would like a minor boost to your Hela matchup, go nuts. It's totally fine. But I just think that like right now, you are legitimately sacrificing some power in every matchup that is not Hela. And I think that the point of the Thanos with Cull deck right now is it just does too many numbers too well. Its numbers are too strong. And your job is to actually be big enough to compete with Hela just on points. And you can do that with enough points.
Yeah.
And I think Leech prevents you from doing that a lot of the time. Now, it is going to win you some games when the Hela players are aggressive with snapping. But one thing I've noticed is that as Hela has become more of a popular deck, they've been less aggressive, right? That they don't have to be aggressive with snapping because the deck just works. And so it becomes this like almost... It's close to being worthwhile, but I just think that like you'd rather play the best version of the deck. And if you play 20 Helas in a row, sure, go ahead. You know what I mean?
That was my experience exactly. I was playing with Jeff initially, and I just ran to a bunch of Helas. So I swapped the Leech in. I mean, in regards to Hela players snapping, I've just been eternally confused sometimes when I'm just like, okay, surely they don't have it. This is like, if they had Hela here, this is the most snappable hand. Like, they're not snapping. We're on the final turn, and then I just get juice for the cube. And I'm like, maybe they're just better. Maybe that's just
like that's actually how a lot of Hela players play now, right?
Yeah.
Because they know the deck is so telegraphed that it's like, all right, I guess I'm just gonna juice you here. I guess I'm just gonna be like, you're because like that one of Hela's superpowers is people stay against it when they shouldn't. Or maybe not necessarily when they shouldn't, but like the Hela player is generally more practiced at calculating the position they're in than the opponent is at calculating the position they're in, because they're the one playing the deck, right? They have a little more experience in those spots. And so I find that once you learn how to have retreat discipline against the deck, it sort of becomes just like, oh, that's fine.
Yeah.
like I still think Hela is just not the kind of experience they should want in a viable deck. I think it's probably like, it's not on Galactus level, it's not on Eliath level, but it's probably third, where it's just like, you look at these cards where it's like you play the card and the game becomes totally invalidated. And I think that's going to be true of a lot of like super high played win rate 6-drops, because that's the point of those super high played win rate 6-drops.
Yeah.
But I think for the most part, I've backed off my you must completely obliterate this stance, just because it's like I see the argument from a texture standpoint, where it's like, maybe this is not great, but it's fine for a month at least, like take a look at it maybe, but like you don't need to rush it, right? This is not a blob situation. This is if you come up with a solution to this, it needs to be equitable to the people who actually enjoy that kind of gameplay situation. I do think I stand by the fact that, Hela should probably never be a tier 1 deck. That is probably not the kind of thing you want to be a tier 1 deck. And it, I would say, undeniably is right now.
I mean, I agree. I agree that Hela's irritating, but I do think that like a tenet of game design is it is important to have decks that are very approachable, and I do think the Hela is an extremely approachable deck. It is kind of a curve out win the game deck.
The weird thing is, I don't think it's approachable.
Why?
It looks approachable, but it's not. There's a lot of hard shit to do in that deck. Like, there's a lot of like, okay, I need to figure out my ordering here. I need to make sure I don't put this thing into Lockjaw, because if I discard this card and then Silver Samurai comes out of Lockjaw, I discard my own Hela, stuff like that. I guess my thought process with Hela is basically like, it creates probably the most non-games in Marvel Snap right now. And I think any deck that creates the most non-games, by which I mean just like the entire game is they play Hela on 6. Like that is any deck that creates the most non-games is naturally going to catch some flack. I do think Hela probably crosses the threshold of like really, really, really annoying. But I think the real thing that's really stopped me from this is I don't know what you would do to make it worse.
To make Hela worse, I mean, it would probably...
I just don't know what you would do.
It'd probably be something in regards to making the discards less consistent, right? Where Blade takes the rightmost card and Lady Sif takes the highestmost card, which, I mean, that's going to affect other archetypes as well. But
right.
I think that's the current issue with Hela, is you can be pretty consistent with your discard outlets and still have Hela in your hand and Hela on. But the thing is like when you talk about non-interactive matchups and these decks just kind of doing the thing and winning the game, there technically do exist tech cards, like we talked about with Leech. It's just that we don't want to put those tech cards in our deck yet because the Hela representation isn't high enough. But theoretically,
it's actually like a fail point of Leech, right? Where it's like, it's the only card that could possibly be good into Hela, but Leech is such a weak card on its own that it requires you to be ahead in order to play it. And what they've done is they've systematically nerfed all the ways to snowball an early game lead, right? They've nerfed every early scaler, which is the exact kind of stuff you would want to play in your Leech deck. So you could be like, I'm going to get more value out of the early turns so I can sacrifice turn 5, do this. And since they kept nerfing every single early game powerhouse, now we're in a situation where like the best early game plays just kind of suck, with the obvious exception of Gladiator, if you even count him as early game. And your whole early game strategy is, I'm just going to Zabu into a 4-drop instead. And so you end up with this situation where turns 1 and 2 don't matter. And then you need turns 3 and 4 to really matter. And turns 3 and 4 probably can't carry you enough to play Leech in your deck most of the time. And this is because turns 1 and 2 and mostly 3 are super, super, super weak. Yeah. Like it's an issue of not necessarily Leech failing its role as a as a like safety valve. It's an issue of there's no good context for you to put Leech in. You have like these Leech Hawk decks, and it's like, okay, that's fine. But if you flub the early game, you die. You cannot play Leech and play from behind. You just can't do it. And the other thing that's weird about Hela is it's actually just like it gets stats on the board anyway, where you're in these situations where it's like, okay, I'm the Hela gamer, but also like, you know, Sif is a 3/5, Blade is a 1/3, Lockjaw is a card. And you're not just like playing nothing on the board to create this. Sometimes you're playing Black Knight, sometimes you're playing Dracula. Like these are like legit threats.
Yep.
And you're in
Ghost
these
Rider.
situations. Yeah. And like you're in these situations where like this is a deck that is not necessarily answerable by Leech, despite being the kind of thing Leech is designed to answer because of, and we're back on one of my least favorite cards of all time, Lockjaw. Like, I mean, the other stuff, but yeah, Lockjaw is a pretty key part of this Hela deck, I would say.
Yeah. Well, Lockjaw's a key part of some of the major players in the metagame right now. It is funny. The amount of times you will play Leech on turn 5 against, you know, decks that Leech is supposed to be the reason why you have Leech in your deck and it wins you the game. Very small. Because like you have Leech in your hand, you're like, okay, I'm setting up my turn 5 is going to be a Leech. And they go turn 4 Ghost Rider. You're like, okay, well, I'm kind of priced in this Leech and I have another 5 drop. Turn 5 Leech, dead. And then they drop, turn 6 Magneto with no abilities. Ooh.
Yeah.
Not
like
too bad.
It's just one of those situations where like Leech requires a specific context to fulfill his role. And I'm not saying we need to buff Leech. I'm just saying like the fact that there's no other ways to deal with a situation like this, I think is an issue.
Yeah. I'm kind of in between with like buffing, the metagame in itself, like looking at it holistically, like whether I like it or dislike it. Because I do like a lot of the aspects of it in terms of deck diversity. That might be less so the case now that Thanos has risen in power so much, but we'll see over the next week or two. I do enjoy being able to, that there's a lot of choices, but it feels like sometimes that there's not a lot of meaningful choices. It kind of feels like I'm playing a Zabu deck, a Hela deck, or a Lockjaw deck.
Yep. I think Hela deck is a Lockjaw deck.
Yeah, well, yeah, I guess, or a discard deck or a destroy deck or something like that. But it feels like there's these 3 pillars of the metagames, and I don't have much expression out of that. But I don't know if that's something I should ask for, right? If that might just be enough. And because we have this cadence of OTAs and new cards, it will just naturally and almost organically start to cycle in terms of archetypes, new cards, and things like that. And maybe that's good enough.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is, personally.
Yeah.
I will say that like there's like some very specific pain points in the metagame. Hell is only one of them. Mm-hmm. Like the way Thanos gets to be non-interactive with Kyera and cheat energy with Scar is
Kyera's pretty annoying. Eh?
That's tough. That's definitely tough. One thing I've started to learn is like you if you have a choice between shanging a Cull Obsidian and a Scar, you shang the Cull Obsidian, because if they play Kyera, you're screwed. It's one of those situations. Like if you don't have priority, I've definitely lost to like shanging a Scar and then they reveal Kyera and then I call them a sniper. A classic, right?
We talk about him, Hela being non-interactive and kind of doing the thing, and it's annoying. But I'm assuming that being on the other side of Thanos is a pretty similar experience.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a coincidence. These are both Lockjaw decks, right? The interesting bit about it is they use Lockjaw for like roughly different reasons, right? Hela uses it to guarantee its combo as much as it can. Like we're just seeing as many cards as we can. Thanos uses it to straight up cheat. For Thanos, seeing the cards is sort of a secondary thing. Mm-hmm. For Hela, seeing the cards is the primary and cheating is the secondary. But the point is, nerf Lockjaw. That's where I'm going with this. Like, those are, I would say, probably the 2 best decks in the game.
What does a nerf to Lockjaw look like? Is it a power?
Okay, so here's my Lockjaw. Here's my Lockjaw nerf pitch. All right, you just delete him.
You can't delete him.
You just delete him. Is
he a 3/0?
No, he's like a 3/4 that does it one time or some shit. He's like a 5/5, but he can't flip things that cost less than 2. I don't fucking know. He's like a you give him the same text except everything you put into him has to cost 2 or more.
Okay. I mean, that changes the value exchange rate, which is a pretty significant downside.
Like, I don't know. Like that probably sucks. Like everyone's probably mad at me right now. But like you stop people cheating, and that would be good. I think he'd actually still be played in Hela though, which means that's not a good solution.
Yeah.
Like Hela still just uses him as like, I'll throw my Jubilee in here. I get to see 2 cards here. I don't give a fuck.
Yeah, I mean, we had Turk on the podcast recently, and I mean, I definitely agree with his sentiment, which I think is a commonly accepted sentiment when it comes to Thanos Lockjaw, the current list, especially with Cull Obsidian. Just like the snap equity of this deck is so good, especially that you have a consistent, very very good curve that no longer needs to include Lockjaw. Like you said, it's a rare occurrence, but the fact that you have a somewhat more serviceable curve without Lockjaw in my opinion, that is what makes this deck so much more powerful. Is I don't need to find that damn dog in order to snap. It's crazy.
Yeah, Thanos' secret has always been that it's like a 50+% win rate deck, but it has the cube profile of a Mr. Negative, where it's like, this is like if Mr. Negative was a good deck baseline, right? Mm-hmm. And you didn't have to like aggressively snap all the like weird Mr. Negative things that you have to snap or you otherwise shouldn't be playing the deck. This is like if Phoenix Force was the best deck in the game, right? Like when we talk about like how combo decks need to not be super consistent high win rate machines because they have such significant cube equity. Thanos is that and always has been that.
Yeah.
Like it is a combo deck that is also a mid-range deck that just does things better than every other deck. And Lockjaw is obviously a key piece of that, but like it just has a lot of damn tools, you know?
Yeah.
It can do everything you want. The fact that like this is I think like the actual just like damning bit about Thanos is just like somehow it still gets to be a Shang-Chi deck. Like somehow
Scar Shang-Chi turn 6. Yeah, like bro, come on.
Somehow it still gets to do that, and it's like it's just like there are certain Thanos metas where it just feels like Thanos is the everything deck. And this is one of those metas where it feels like that. Like Thanos is the everything deck. It's got Lockjaw cheating. It's got Kyera to protect your big stuff. It's got arbitrarily large guys. It's got Vision and Jeff to get into closed off locations. It's got location control from Reality Stone. It's got Magneto to tech against some of your worst matchups. Like it feels like the everything deck. There's not a thing that you want from this deck that it probably can't do except play Enchantress, except you could probably put Enchantress in there. Like you can kind of do whatever you want. And there's this that's how original Thanos felt. And like obviously this is a pale imitation of original Thanos, but the metagame now is a lot weaker than it was then too.
Yeah.
And so we're in this situation where it's just like when Thanos is good, it starts to feel like this is everything. When this deck starts rolling downhill, it is just like, oh my God, you cannot win.
Yeah.
And that's always how Thanos has gone up and down, but its profile has remained the same in the hands of good players, which is it plays like a combo deck, but also can win those close to cubers. Like it doesn't you aren't priced into snapping when you do stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that Thanos is a deck that was at least previously defined, or that's how people looked at it, as a deck that was defined by its peaks and valleys. And I think with the addition to Cull Obsidian, it just lessens
more
that
peaks.
Yeah, well, it's not even more peaks. It's like we're just a little bit more flat, and like we're flat, and our standard rate is way above the rest of the metagame, and it makes the deck so much more powerful. Adding consistency into a deck like Thanos, which is dropping multiple 6-drops a game, is playing 4/10s, is playing things like Devil Dinosaur, has tech cards in it. Like that is a lot, and it's cheating with Lockjaw. it's a lot of axes to compete on, and what do you think is a good deck into Thanos that isn't something that is also another ship in the night like Hela?
Junk decks, like a Nihilist bounce if you draw the right cards, for sure. Like it's not like Thanos is unbeatable. Like it's the same way you would look at beating old versions of Thanos. It's just, things like Darkhawk aren't really as viable of an option because of Blob, right? Yeah. But like you are in these situations where it's like, yeah, like junk decks, sending over that -10, sending over that Hood with a Nihilist, like that's really damaging to them. Like things like that, if you play them well, can be very good into Thanos. I feel like with a good draw, those decks are favored. Anything that is looking to clog up lanes is obviously good into Thanos. So, like, for example, Debris Hazmat stuff. It's not my favorite archetype, but it probably will beat Thanos. Hela can match Thanos power for power. Destroy can match Thanos power for power. And actually, Living Tribunal, because Thanos does not have Enchantress in it. is a functional way to attack the deck. But right now, Thanos is occupying. I mean, like Phoenix Force too, right? Like it's loses to combo decks.
I think it's
right?
Phoenix Force with Phoenix Force on 4 after destroying multiple man. Like I don't think it. Yeah. So Phoenix Force.
Yeah, I mean Phoenix Force when you do the Phoenix, that sort of goes without saying.
Yeah, I mean, no, Phoenix Force on 5 is also really
like
good. It's
sometimes
really good.
playing Loki, right? So like that's crazy too. Loki, by the way, is still fairly solid at Thanos. Like it's you're probably good there.
Yeah, I think Phoenix Force on 5 can beat a lot of decks. I don't think it can beat Thanos. I think you have the Phoenix Force on 4, which is like
you have the Phoenix Force on 4.
Yeah, that's kind of hard to do though. It's you need like very specific cards.
Have you considered getting better at Phoenix Force?
Yeah, I'm working.
You are the more you do that.
Yeah, I'm working on it. I tried Loki as well. I didn't. It was okay. It was really good during one of the hot locations, but I think I've gone back to the Eliath for now. Sorry, I'm a little bit sick. So anyway, in the news, we did have the Valentine's Week event. Is this the first event of this kind? I believe it is. I don't know if they've ever tweaked values for any kind of seasonal event before.
I believe this is the first, yes.
Yeah. So we had, you play 2 pairs of cards, what they call couples in your deck, and they would get additional power bonuses for this limited time event. We don't have to talk about all of them. There were some relevant ones that I did see attempted to be played against me. That was mainly She-Hulk and Daredevil. Outside of that, I think I faced one Rescue Iron Man. Didn't work out too well for my opponent. I considered playing Scarlet Witch in Thanos instead of Jeff, just to get the additional power on Vision, but ultimately didn't try it. What was your experience with this limited event so far?
I'm glad it wasn't hyper impactful.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm sad it didn't get an OTA. Like, I obviously I'm sad about that, but I also don't know if any of my issues with this metagame could be fixed with an OTA. So I'm willing to just sit down on that one, right? Where it's like, obviously I would have loved if they magically fixed all the things I didn't like with an OTA, but that seems like an unrealistic expectation for an OTA. And therefore, I guess it's just like, I'm just sad. It's not like a realistic critique to be like, hey, could you guys have fixed Hela in an OTA? Like, could you guys have solved Lockjaw in an OTA? And it's like, yeah, you probably couldn't have. So I would guess my head is sort of at like, I think this event was dope. Mm-hmm. I think it was sick. I'm a big fan of it because it managed to do something that's like a hot location, but more exciting and more fun and more interesting. And it's not as annoying as a hot location. Because it's not as good. It's not as omnipresent. And so if they should do this instead of hot locations. Like, this is so much better. This is like, they should never okay. They shouldn't get aggressive with these. I think, obviously you don't want them to be super common. Mm-hmm. That said, if they were to make them super common, holy shit, if they changed one of the locations days to like this instead, that would be a million times better. Because when you look at a hot location, what it actually does is encourage what can only be either degenerate deck building or no change in the metagame, depending on the impact of the hot location, right? You are either building to abuse it, or you are building a normal deck because it's not that impactful, right? There's no in between. There are no hot locations that have just been like, well, I'm going to change 1 or 2 cards in my deck so I can do something minorly interesting on this hot location. It's always, I'm going to abuse it. I'm going to put Green Goblin in Bar Sinister. I'm going to abuse this as much as I possibly can, right? And this is a much more soft touch, a much more middle ground, where the people that want to do stuff with these underplay cards can. And it's actually not bad. And like, there's a Mogwai tweet where he's like, can we please just keep this permanent? Because I like being able to play Captain America without inhaling massive amounts of copium. And like, that's dope. That's so sick. Now you're only inhaling like, smaller amounts of copium when you play Captain America. Yes. And that's good, right? Like, it's like, I think that this kind of event is so much more dynamic and interesting and fun than any hot location has ever been. And so if you told me, hey, twice a month, instead of hot locations, we're doing a 1-day one of these. That's so sick. That's so good.
I think it might be a little
much better.
A little bit more effort to execute other than hot locations.
You don't have to do 10 cards every time. Just be like, I bet you I could come up with 5 cards every week. I bet you I could do it. You give me a theme, I bet you I could do it.
Yeah, I mean, the goal of these kind of things is not necessarily balance as well. You don't want to egregiously break the metagame, but balance is not necessarily the goal. It's just to give people extra incentive to deck build and experiment with cards that are maybe not currently represented in the metagame. It's cool.
If it's a day, you just get to screw around, right? Do a day where like you want to see. Okay, do a day where it's like, all right, check this out. There's a lot of Lockjaw running around, right? We buff every card that puts rocks in the deck. I don't know. Is that a thing? Like, do a thing where like Darkhawk, Rock Slide, Korg all get +2 power, and just do it for a day. And is that actually that much worse? Like, this is what I'm getting at here is like you hear that and you're like, that's the most annoying shit I've ever heard. But I promise you, it is not more annoying than 95% of hot locations. Like, that's where I'm going with this, where it's like, yes, that does sound super fucking annoying, but I guarantee you it's better than the average Bar Sinister hot location day. I guarantee you it is less deleterious to the metagame and potentially more informative than anything else.
What about a day where it's like you play original design Galactus? For today, it's original.
That would be about as annoying as average hot location.
It's average hot location.
Like, that is like, this is what I'm talking about. It is so much harder to come up with one of these that is actually on the level of a hot location, because the hot location is it's the worst. It's the worst, and this is so much better. And they should. Okay, here's my pitch. Here's my new plan to get hired by Second Dinner. You ready? Hire me and put me in charge of doing this specifically. Like, give me a stipend and I will do one of these for you every week. And it will be less annoying than a hot location. I promise you.
I think hot locations are actually only annoying to players that are highly invested in winning, not their actual player base. I think that their player base probably enjoys it to an extent.
But would their player base enjoy that, or would they enjoy this more? Because I think it's also a thing that where their player base would enjoy this more because it is explicitly making the cards they own stronger.
What if it was the cards they didn't own that got stronger? That would probably be annoying.
Then we probably wouldn't have to do it that way. You know what I mean? Like, we would have to focus on early pool stuff. Okay, how about this one? Hot location where Squirrel Girl, Khazar, Blue Marvel, and I don't know, what other zoo cards? Just pick like 5 zoo cards. Ant-Man, Khazar, Blue Marvel, Squirrel Girl. They all got +2 power.
Yeah.
Yeah. It'd be cool.
Series 3 meta game is freaking tyranny at that point.
It'd be cool, right? Like
one guy buys Kyera and just fucking climbs to 1 million infinite.
Look, all I'm saying is like there's so much you can do with this concept that they haven't executed on. And I think it's actually a concept that is best served in 1 day increments rather than 1 week. If they're going to get real weird with it, 1 week of that sounds terrible, but 1 day of that sounds great. And much like a hot location, that is a really interesting thing to do. I can tell you, I would be infinitely more inclined to play if they did this instead of hot locations on Wednesdays and Sundays. Infinitely. Like, this is the format of having it for a week limits the power of what you can do, which I think they properly understood. And they were like, okay, we need to have a like minimal power thing. That's why we didn't do like, we're not going to buff Deadpool Death because that's already good. We don't want to be stupid with this. We're going to buff things that are bad and also fit the theme, right? And I think, A, great job. Love that. B, that is a constraint enforced by the fact that it's going to be around for a week. And if this was around for a day, if this was instead of hot locations, you could get so much weirder with it and it would be so much more fun.
Yeah, I think the TLDR is that this event was a win, and that they should look into doing it again, And if that means
I think they need to look into doing it again, but not like this.
What was
Does that
wrong
make
with
sense?
This one specifically?
That it's a week.
Oh, it's an entire week.
The fact that it's a week limits what you can do with this, because you don't want your shit to be extra annoying for an entire week. They should do exactly what I said. They should do, this is the new hot location twice a month. Twice a month, we're going to do this for a day, and we're going to see how you like it.
Yeah. All right, I just want to send out some lists for new cards. We already talked about one, kind of. But just for the Thanos list, and the Leech is interchangeable with a Jeff here. It's just Lockjaw, Chimera, Wave, Shang-Chi, Cull Obsidian, Devil Dinosaur, Leech. Again, that could be Lockjaw. Vision, Blob, Thanos, Scar, Magneto. I mean, this list has been performing really well for me, to be honest. I climbed almost 200 SP in like less than 6 hours with it. I would say like over the past couple days. And yeah, it's just, it's the snap equity for me. Like, there's clearly games that you're not in, and there is clearly games that you are in. And yeah, at least where I'm competing, it's doing really well. For the bounce list, this is bounce with Cull Obsidian. Cam laid out like why you might not want to play this list. This is a list that I was playing. I did cut the Enchantress. It's Hood, Forge, Iceman, Nico, Beast, Zabu, Falcon, Shang-Chi, Werewolf by Night, Cull Obsidian, Sentry, Annihilus. So I was playing into that Annihilus shell. It seemed fine, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, Thanos was just working so much better for me, to be honest.
Hey everyone, just popping on here because I realized we had to cut this episode short for a multitude of reasons. I just came back from a trip that went down to Austin for the marathon, and yeah, obviously I didn't run. You can probably hear that I'm sick, but yeah, getting back on Monday, putting this episode up, I'm realizing that we didn't really have the normal ending to the episode, so I felt like cutting it off like right where I basically did right now would be awkward without this explanation. So anyway, here you go. Anyway, we'll be back to the normal stuff next week. Thank you all so much for listening. See you then.